Hi, the episode is coming at you in just a minute. I just wanted to take a second to let you know that if you can, leave a 5-star review or follow us on your podcast platform of choice. That really helps the podcast and allows us to continue to provide a platform for independent musicians in Berlin. And it helps provide you, the listener, with more insights and experiences and advice from independent musicians that are living off music and making their way in the independent music scene here in Berlin and in Europe. Thank you very much, and I'll leave you to listen to the episode. Thank you. Welcome back to Unsigned Berlin. I'm sat here today with Roland, aka Schwarz, and we're here to talk about the new album Red Pill, and we'll start off with a little snippet of David Lynch.
But the script seems to be written by David Lynch.
And that was David Lynch by Schwarz. Your last album was in 2018, so it's been a big period of time working on this album. Was there anything after finishing the last album that you really wanted to work on and develop, and you were like, this is something that I just feel like wasn't strong enough on this last album, I want to bring it forward?
My last album was the first of my project Schwarz, and on that my approach was coming from a singer-songwriter perspective over film music to electronic music, and I used a lot of cinematic elements. I avoided guitar for some time because I played a lot of guitar for many years and I wanted to get a break from that, so I focused more on piano, strings and beats. And by the end of 2019, I played a support tour of a friend of mine, Anu Bunga, and on that tour I decided to rearrange the existing songs and strip them down to guitar, beats, synth bass, and of course voice. And that was so much fun, and I felt so at home all of a sudden that I decided to start with this more minimalistic and more indie approach into the phase of my second album.
Okay, right.
And it took some time for me to develop that, because like from where I came from, the beats were a bit more EDM like, the drums were more aggressive and it didn't fit to the sound. So I had to relearn a few things actually.
Mm-hmm. And for your performance, which is at your EP release show, which thank you very much, by the way, for inviting me, you had that same setup of synths and then also beats and guitar. What are you actually using for that? Is it it's not a loop pedal, but what's your tech setup for that?
My tech setup is I have a MacBook running Ableton on it, a Fireface interface, and my Telecaster going through a Line 6 Helix. And what I do is I spend a lot of time, of course, on, for example, programming the guitar sounds, and when I look over the playbacks, I take this approach that I kind of try to produce the album in a way I wanted it to sound live. So I didn't take it too far from that, but I stripped it a little more down. And then I tried to find ways to fill the gaps, either with guitar and guitar effects or with vocal effects, like vocoders or something like that. And the biggest part of the work was preparing the automated tracks, because everything that I do runs through Ableton and runs through a set of automations, like from the vocal reverbs over the sidechain ducking of the guitar to the playback, to the beat, and and kind of preparing all of that in a way that I can send kind of like a stem mix over 7 channels to the mixing engineer.
And you chose to do the show in the Coliseum, is that right? The cinema,
Yes.
which is a really cool venue. When I came in, I kind of when I was going to the screen, I was like, oh, this is weird. There's like a courtyard. And then I
Exactly. Yeah.
didn't even process it until after the show I came on. I was like, oh, this isn't a courtyard. It's like the outside of a building that's been turned into the inside of a building.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to do the show there?
I came across that cinema already years ago. And I mean, like usually these big multiplex cinema complexes are quite anonymous, but this one was built into like an 1800, like early 1900 industrial courtyard. And so which is why you have this strange feeling of you are entering a lobby and you feel outside and inside at the same time. Then there are these stairways that are kind of floating in the middle of the hall upstairs to the second floor that has been raised into this whole yard and built into this whole yard. And at some point earlier this year, I decided to make a release show. And I wanted it to be something special. And I talked to my booking agent, Kathleen from RBK Fusion. And then she came with this idea that, hey, there are these guys, they have taken over the cinema that closed down, I think, sometime in 2020 and haven't reopened since. And then she said, and they're going to turn it into a cinema / event space / concert venue. And then I went there, and I very quickly decided that I wanted it to happen there.
Yeah. What was the performance like in the show? I remember you mentioning how silent it is because it's built for silence. What was the show like doing it in a cinema versus in like a regular music event space?
I think the focus is very intense in a way, because of course people go to a concert to see a concert. In particular, I think in Germany it's also like a thing that people go to a concert and they come to a pop concert with an approach that is maybe a bit like from a classical concert or like from going to a theater. But then you have like these seats. This is also one thing that really focuses the people, because they don't turn around, they always look to the front. And then when you have these seats and you have them like going up, then you have this effect that you stand there and the space in a way becomes two-dimensional and feels a bit like you are singing against a wall of people piling up.
Oh, right.
In a way. I mean, it's a bit not I don't want to overstress this image, but in a way it was like that. It's funny because you see like almost everyone, and then as you mentioned earlier, the irritating thing is that you are performing in a room that is not resonating at all, because it was prepared for cinema subwoofers and everything, that like every tone just sounds as long as it is supposed to, and you rarely have that in a space of that scale.
Yeah, I also weirdly felt like I talked to people more, because if I go to a show alone that's in a concert venue, I'll talk to nobody. But in a cinema, you're kind of forced to, because people will try to get like to seats and stuff. So you kind of talk a little more, which was really surprising to me, because you're like, oh, cinemas is like a really solitary experience. But it's kind of the opposite. And you also had the visuals done for that whole show, which were different to the visuals for the album. I actually forgot to show it for the camera, but and the cover art for the full album. There's a lot of visual elements, and I know you did work with film before doing the Schwarz project. Was that something that you were thinking about even before you started the songwriting process, or is it really integrated, or was it like, okay, I've got an album that's finished, let's figure out visuals?
In a way, there is an interaction between video and music, but it is not. To be honest, it couldn't happen as much as I would have wanted it. It would be like an amazing thing for me, for example, to work with a visual artist from scratch and writing songs and creating visuals at the same time, like simultaneously. But in this way, it was like I did the album, and what happened for the music videos, for example, was that I changed some elements in the song to react on the video to make it fit better, because at a certain point I start to look at it, and this is also like something exciting for me, because for the most part I work on my own, but when a visual artist comes in, a videographer, and it's very difficult for me to do anything there, so I leave it to them. And then I get it back, and and when some kind of dialogue can happen between that, then that's very exciting for me and it's inspiring. And so I did a bit of that on the videos, and on the visuals. There was this time when I was preparing that show, and I realized, okay, this is going to be like a long show, like a long set, like 90 minutes, and I haven't done that in that setup before. And so I felt like, even though, and you know, I'm in a cinema, and I felt like, okay, this could be something that might be really helpful. And then I thought about, but I don't see these typical visuals that you have like a lot in electronic music with geometric figures and video effects and everything. And so I talked to a friend of mine who did a music video almost 20 years ago, like my first music video. And then he said like, yeah, you know, I can try something, and then you just tell me if you like it. And then he did it, and I loved it, because like he sent me this screenshot of a construction site with just a large pile of sand. And then he told me, like, very seriously, and like, it would be an underestimation to say that this is fun. I feel like something big is getting out of here and is coming up. And then he's showing me this construction site, and I had to laugh so hard, but I knew like where he was going, and he was, and I have to agree with him. I love it.
Yeah, it worked really great. Are you using those for the tour as well, I guess?
Yeah, wherever it is possible, I will. We are still checking that, but of course it is a part of the show that is also refreshing for me as well.
Yeah, I was also, when I was watching them, I mean, it makes sense now that it was a construction site, but I was just seeing the sand. I was like, where did they shoot this? And am I right in thinking you went to LA to shoot the videos for?
Yes.
For two videos, and I can picture
3.
them and hear them, but I can't remember for 3. What were the songs again? Sorry.
No worries. No, it was A Crack of Light was the first one. Then the second video was of Peekaboo and Stranger Smilings, like combining these two songs together, and the third one was David Lynch.
Oh yeah, okay. They were like, because the first two feel very LA, and then the David Lynch one. Maybe I was distracted by the rabbits as well.
No, but for the David Lynch shoot, we went into the desert at Lancaster, which is like close to LA.
Okay.
Yeah, but it doesn't. It starts in the same house in Venice Beach where most of the first video happens as well, but it's not that obvious. Obviously, LA, you don't have the Hollywood Hills there or whatever.
Yeah. For those videos, did you come to the video team with the scripts and everything kind of already prepared, or was it like, I think this is the energy I want, and it was more of a conversation?
It is always a bit painful for me, but I have to confess that it's really hard for me to, when I write a song, I would always say that I always feel the quality of a song in terms of how much I see something when I listen to the song. Yeah. How visual they feel. But it's very hard for me to imagine a music video or something for myself. So at some point I decided I leave that completely to others, and I looked for some time for a partner there, and I found this production couple, Julian and Amelie. They're called Raw Souls, and I met them actually by the end of last year, and said, yeah, we're going to LA, and if you want to shoot, then let us know and we can arrange something. And what I did was I wrote them little phrases about things that come to my mind about the songs.
Right.
And sometimes it was something that is in the lyrics, sometimes it was something that was just some background, that what started the whole process of the song. And I gave that to them, and this is what they came up with then. Yeah.
In the same sort of idea of videos, even though it's for the last project, the In Your Eyes video is filmed, it says in Pyongyang at the end of the video. I wanted to ask, what was the whole process of that like? Did you go to North Korea? Were you like, why did you decide to do it there? What was the whole process like? I'm so curious.
For that, I have to start with the video of Home, because when we released Home in 2017, I mean, so far it has been my most successful video with over 1 million views, and it was almost overwhelming for me to, I don't know, to wake up in the night and then look at the YouTube video and then just see the language changing. And so it kind of went around the globe and people watched it. And the approach of the video was, we had the song, and it was actually my manager back then, Steffen, who said like, okay, this song is very emotional, but let's not make something artificial. Let's take something that is real and raw and beautiful. And so he had this friend who did a documentary about a family, a very, very strong and very heartful family that lives in the townships of Johannesburg, I guess. And and he went with them in their everyday life for some time during the World Cup in South Africa. And the video came out and it was so powerful. And then we decided to stick with the concept of working with documentary films. And by that time, I went to the cinema and I saw the film Under the Sun by Vitaly Mansky, a Russian director who went to Pyongyang to make a documentary about 1 year in the life of a 10-year-old girl.
Right.
And the film is fascinating because it is actually not a documentary about a 10-year-old girl in Pyongyang, but it is a documentary about trying to make a documentary of a girl in Pyongyang. And they let the camera running while some advisor from the state jumped in and told them what to do, and everything was scripted like crazy. And they were like, so everything was very, very restrictive. And so this whole film was illegal in the end. And so he never went back to North Korea. I think they would imprison him instantly.
Right.
And by that time, when we decided that In Your Eyes would be the next single, I felt like that would be a really, really strong combination. And then we actually asked him if he would allow us to use his film, and he agreed.
Wow.
Yeah, which was incredible for me.
Was there a moment between doing that, which is very, very much using footage from someone else, to now where it's really, really high production quality, things that you've worked with and kind of melded from the very beginning, where you really decided to go in that direction of, this documentary style is working really well, but I want to express something more specific that's in a different world?
I felt like that we were kind of done with that concept. And also, I think a concept is only as good as you have like really ideas to really develop it and get it done. And since at first I didn't have any idea, and then I felt like that it would be really good to have something that holds everything together. It was it felt like the right thing to do it that way now. And so they have not only done the videos, they have also like done the covers of the singles and of the album. And it's yeah, like it's a whole aesthetic
Package
world
that's all together.
package. Yeah.
Yeah. For the switching between, well, not switching, but the development from the first album to this album, how have you found time and found a way to really develop a singular sound? Because the album all sounds, I mean, it's an album, it's all together. Between working on film scoring projects and songwriting for other people, have you struggled with that at all in terms of finding your sound for the new thing?
Sometimes. I mean, it has its up and down sides to work simultaneously on different things. There was this one point where I was working on the album, and I showed it to a befriended producer, and he said, which was about like I think 1.5 years ago, so, and he said, really great, but in a way, it lacks for like pop music. It lacks a middle. It goes so much like. Into the whiteness, and then I realized, okay, maybe that's because recently I've been working so much doing score music, which usually has well, not no center, but of course it doesn't have like a center as strong as pop music, because in the center everything important from the film, for example, has to happen, like the dialogues and everything. And so you kind of make a music that goes more into the whiteness, to left and right. And pop music has to be like in a way that it is the main character, but as well the room. So like everything at once. And so I realized that. But at the same time, it helped me. So at some point I had to turn it back a bit more to something that is more centered. But at the same time, it helped me, I think, to develop my own sound, to get some distance to what is pop music now, what do people listen to now, and because I wanted to find my own thing, and I think so. In terms of that, it helped.
Mm-hmm. With the film scoring, how did you first get started in that? Because I feel like when you're releasing music as an artist, you can just kind of do it. But for film scoring, you need to find projects to be involved with. How did you first get involved with that?
The very, very first projects were short films of students that came to a concert, and we became friends, and was like one student, and she was working with a studying film music composer, and she was so unsatisfied because he did actually like main character music where you just needed something that just adds a little. And so we ended up in that I explained her exactly how she should explain him to program the synthesizer and everything. And then she said, okay, the next time I will ask you. And then she did that. And then I did like, and the next short film. And my first like real project came when actually a fan of my music, Alyosha, did his first long-term documentary film, which came out in 2011, Tom Eats Zizou, about a very moved career of a soccer player in Germany, and moving career, sorry. And and that worked so well that we have been working on every film that he has released since, ever since,
Has there been a real effect, do you think, on on your music in kind of in a way where you feel like film music has added, doing all these film projects has added a lot of style with, I mean, you were working with the strings before, I think, a little bit with the,
Little bit,
a
yeah.
little bit, but did that, for example, with your last album where you had the classically trained violinist and pianist, did that come from doing film scores and you were like, oh, this is something I want to include more? Or
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one thing in general that making film music added to my stuff that I do as an artist is that I became a lot more unafraid of just trying out stuff and taking instruments and sounds that I've never worked with before and just see what I can squeeze out of them, combining stuff, mashing stuff up, and at some point, and sometimes even really searching for situations where I totally lose control of what is happening, like between the layers of sounds, and where I, in the best case, I end up somewhere where I didn't intend to go in the first place, but I am positively surprised.
is there anything on Red Pill that you feel like is a example of that, or that you're really proud, even though maybe you don't know how you got there?
Yeah, I think plenty of, quite often these are like more details.
Right.
Like, for example, when I was on, last year I was on holiday in Italy, and I was sitting outside, and there was a bird, and this bird sounded like a hi-hat.
Right.
And so I recorded this bird, and I squeezed this sound like for ages until it like really worked. And it's now the hi-hat sound of, for example, of Bolt of a Lightning, and I think on Heavy Bag and some other songs as well.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest song for me, and actually the last song to finish, was the title track, because it has like it has two very different parts, and the last part works sound and beat wise very different than the beginning, and I would say everything else on the album. And this was like ages of like squeezing also like tiny details, the balance between bass and kick, and then just at some point really like in a moment of frustration just leaving everything and just getting back another day and trying again, and yeah.
At that point where the album's almost done and then you're doing the title track, are you already going into it with, this is the concept for the album, it's about the way people communicate and the internet and how that changes it, let's figure out how to put this into a track that sums up the album a little bit? Or is it still just play around in the world and then see what can happen?
I'm always looking for subjects that really matter to me, and it is difficult for me to write songs on a perspective of I don't know, like standard subjects. Like people would say, songs like romantic or non-romantic love songs are like the biggest subject if you want to have a hit or something. It's very difficult for me. I can't write about, oh no, I don't find the urge to finish something if it's not something that really matters to me. So, and knowing that, I start with playing around with sounds on the one side, but on the other side also thinking about what is that telling me, and what is something that I could express throughout this, and what is something that is maybe bothering me at the moment. And over the last years, the way we communicate via social media and all the ways that we communicate nowadays that haven't been there when I grew up is something that is it is something that I'm observing like for quite some time, and I'm thinking about and discussing with friends, and so I started to take notes, and at some point, and this was actually before I decided that this was like a main topic of the album itself. The lyrics to Red Pill came up, and then I started to dig a little deeper, and then I wrote a lot of stuff that went to the trash, and then I wrote a lot of stuff that I worked on and on and on and on and reworked, and that ended up on the album. And I mean, in the end, there are also some songs on the album that go into a different direction because I didn't want to like really like restrict me that much. But the main subject stayed the same, and it also helped me a bit to get to not get lost too much along the way, to have some focus, something that I can aim for.
When you were coming on to that last track or having finished the majority of the album, how much were you going back and changing, especially songwriting, to try to make it more of an album versus just a collection of songs? Were you revisiting songs and changing them, or was it kind of just building from the ground up and then it is the album that it is?
Well, I had this moment where most of the album was done, but I wasn't satisfied with the sound. But actually, everything was recorded,
Right.
and then I listened to a lot of stuff, talked to some people, tried to get some input. Also got some help of a producer who did a lot like of hip hop beats, but also like score music, Boris Rogowski, and he. I asked him to give me a little like workshop in how he builds his kick drums, and so so I did stuff like that. But this was mostly sound aesthetic fine tuning, mixing, and a bit of rearranging. But this was like the last, I would say, half year of the album until it was like really finished.
Right. Is there anything from that time, from that workshop, that was like, it can be as technical as you like, but that you feel made a really big difference and you're like, this has changed a lot of the way that I work? Or that I'll use this all the time now?
Yeah, actually the kick drum sounds.
Right.
Because as I mentioned earlier, when you listen to like my old album, I think the most obvious it is on songs like maybe called Sunlight or so, you have this very glossy kick drum that is almost EDM like.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly that this was like, I wanted the total opposite. Like I wanted to sing a lot more intimate. I wanted the album to sound softer. I wanted the guitar to play a main role in it. And so I had to find a way to make the beats softer without lacking power.
Right.
But without working with, I don't know, like huge reverbs or whatever you do to make drums like strong and massive. And so I learned a lot about using layers of acoustic drums, combining them, acoustic kicks, combining them with 808s, and
stacking. Right.
and this is actually out of that. It was funny because I did it like on one or two songs, and then I felt really comfortable with it, and I ran like through the whole album and changed that. And once I changed the kick drum, which is like the loudest element in the whole sound, besides the vocals maybe, but I think no, actually it's the loudest. Of course, it interferes with all the rest, so you have to rearrange everything around it, which is what I did, and. But now, knowing that, I think this is going to make things a lot easier for me in the future to know like what kind of foundation I want to have and how to achieve that.
Is most of the sound on the album, is it mostly like synths and sort of MIDI style things as opposed to live instrumentation?
For the most part, it is, but I did my best to kind of disturb that in a way that it doesn't feel like that. And I did it like in many different ways, like either tiny automations so that no loop sounds like exactly the same, or distorting stuff and everything. I wanted to have the precision of the grid and of the electronic elements and the control, but at the same time I wanted it to feel a lot more analog than my last album, for example.
Yeah. Is there anything with that you feel like has helped a lot, whether it's just the automation or at least with Ableton, you can randomize the velocity of hits, which is really a great quick way to just be like, okay, we'll do it by like 10%, and then it's anything like that has helped with that process.
Yeah, well, I work with Logic. As far as I know, yeah, there might be a feature like that, but I haven't found it yet. But no, but like what I do, like for example, is this like kind of randomizer. I checked out a lot of different tape simulations, like more trashy ones like Sketch Tape, or more clear ones like Satin, and I used loads and very different of them on different tracks, so that everything is kind of shaky.
Yeah, are you using those as buses usually, or on different instruments?
It depends. I mean, going back to the kick drum, for example, in the beginning, I used, for example, tape saturation on a whole bus, and then I talked to Boris, and he told me like, you can use tape saturation on everything, but you don't use it on the sub bass because it is going to mess up everything for you. And then I rearranged everything. And so I started to use it like on some of the buses, but not on everything. And at some point, I mean, it's a lot of fun to work with effects like that, but at some point, sometimes you realize then, oh, I put it there. No, it's nice, and there, and there. And then you overdo it, and at some point, you have like a lot of harmonic distortion, but kind of everything feels indirect. Yeah. And so I had to like then turn it back again a bit, and it takes a lot of time, because I think the hardest part of producing when you go into these sound details is that you always get used to what you hear. And so the moment you get used to what you hear, the foundation of the foundation of your decisions is kind of messed up. Yeah. And so it's very important to take breaks and to maybe to go into something else, do some film music in between, or like take a break. Yeah.
Yeah. When did you start getting into production? Does it go all the way back to Voltaire?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the 90s, I had a lot of school bands. I had a rock band, and also I played in different rock bands, and we went to the studio, and back then it was always like that. You had these studios, you had to rent them for a lot of money. The equipment there was crazy expensive, and then you always had this guy who told you what to do because he was the owner of the studio. Even though you paid him, he was telling you what to do. And I was very frustrated by that sometimes. And so when in the late 90s, a friend of mine had a working station with a Mac, and a very early and now very trashy looking version of Logic.
In the documentary I watched, and it's silly because it's such a stupid little detail, but one of the coolest things, I was like, that Logic is so different to what it looks like now.
But this this was, I mean, this is like really for me is the mid-age Logic,
Yeah.
because the version I'm talking about before costed like about 1,800 euros before you even had a sampler or anything
Yeah.
there. You just had a few plugins like an equalizer, a compressor, a very shitty reverb, and kind of that was it. And everything costed extra, and I was fascinated by the possibilities I had there, and I started to work on the first demos and some of them were actually ended up on the first album of Voltaire, of course, then like produced with the band and everything.
Yeah.
But by the time I learned that I really like going into sounds and into mixing, and I also like I got very strong reactions from that demos, and so I felt like that was something that I should keep working on. And then we went to the studio with the band, and later we also like had a really great production duo, which was Whitey, still a friend of mine nowadays, Oliver Weiskopf, Stonehenge Studio in Siegburg. Cheers. and then Götz Botzenhardt, who is also like an amazing guy who lives like 4 decades now in London and happened to be the co-producer and final mixing engineer of stuff like the first 2 Faithless albums, so like Insomnia and stuff like that. And he kind of gave me a lot of space. He also like made me feel like very comfortable that I could give like input into stuff. He was not very bossy.
Right.
And so I tried out a lot of stuff. At some point I took the laptop, put my headphones on, turned on the mic of the laptop, put like a lot of delays and reverb on it, and just did stuff. And some of that ended up on the first album. And played, for example, piano with endless reverbs, and which is something. It's very common to do that nowadays. Back then it was like very new for me, and I was always looking for making. Even when I was playing in an indie band, I was always looking for something that would expand the sound of you just hear the band, but there's something happening that is not so easily to analyze or to explain, which I guess was something that really fascinated me about the OK Computer album of Radiohead.
Right. When I'm songwriting when I'm making tracks, a lot of it is starting with finding textures, whether it's some samples or playing around with synths, and then that triggers something where it's like, oh, this texture wants to be this harmony or something like that. Do you have the same kind of experience where when you sit down to write, are you pretty texture driven, or are you more like playing with your guitar, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, when I listen to modern productions nowadays that I find very intriguing, for example, a lot of the stuff that the artist Nova does from Berlin, then I feel like that a lot of that comes from the approach that you are describing, which is to me something that comes maybe from an hip-hop approach where you work with where it takes samples and you isolate stuff and you play around with it and see where it takes you. And I always try to establish that in my writing, but I think I'm too conservative of a singer-songwriter to really do that. But on Elements I managed to do that, and but I mean, there's so much exciting stuff that comes out of that. For example, like also all the productions of Fred Again, so as well. Yeah.
Well, we're coming to the end. There are a couple of things that I wanted to ask about first. You mentioned in your EP show, the release show, that you were banned by the band in Iran as an artist or something. I'm not sure if I understood it right. I was there thinking, is my German okay?
The whole story was in 2019. I did 2 songs with the German artist Schiller. He's very successful in Germany, but also quite successful in Iran. He's like
okay.
one of the few Western artists who are permitted to perform in Iran. But he always performs like instrumental music.
Right.
And for the first time, he was trying to bring a singer to the country. And and for that, like we had a lot of stuff had to happen. We had to like send them the lyrics. They translated them into Farsi. They got the permittance from some official government thing, whatever, cultural bureau. They got all of that, and then they invited me. Then we went there, and we were there for 10 days. In these 10 days, there were planned to play 3 shows in Tehran in one venue. 2 of them were already sold out, and so during the preparation for that, just a simple call came in, and then the agent there came to me, and he like really he was almost crying, and he like took me to side and said, "I'm really, really sorry, but we can't let you perform because otherwise they're going to close all of this down."
Oh, wow. Is that for, I mean, obviously at some level political, but what was the reason? Is it because of singing in a foreign language or because of the message of the songs? Or?
In general, I think it is in Iran that they don't like the situation of a person with a microphone,
Right.
like a single person standing on a stage, which is,
Right. Yeah.
if it's not like really someone they know exactly what he is about to do and say.
Yeah.
But they didn't say anything.
Right.
They didn't explain anything because they don't have to.
Yeah.
And I was very sad, and I think I've never received so many messages via Instagram, because Instagram is quite strong in Iran, and also Schiller has a lot of followers, and a lot of people like texted me, and they were like, either they were. No, the funny thing was that the official announcement was that the agent did a mistake, and that is why I can't perform, because they said we have to take care that we don't upset them in any way, because otherwise we get all of us into more trouble.
Yeah.
But the people understood, and they sent me messages. They were really like sending messages like, our fucking government is fucking us. They were like swearing, and that was also like really impressive. So it didn't surprise me at all when people like when this uprising in Iran happened, because the government there is really strong, but the people of Iran are also like really, really strong.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are in their opinion and about and so they were really angry and sad, and people came to the hotel and gave me like pictures that they made for me and everything. They were like almost apologizing for the government.
Well, in a similar vein, you mentioned Autokonzerte that didn't, which I think maybe I misunderstood, but is a concert where there's people in cars because of COVID. Is that?
Yeah.
In Kenya, that didn't happen, and I wanted to ask not why Kenya, but like, why did you feel like Kenya was an option to do that?
Oh no, wait.
Maybe I misunderstood.
This is something where we're mixing two things up, but
okay.
Maybe the thing was like also Schiller did in early 2020. He did like a car concert, and that was a really weird experience. But also like I was with him in Kenya because his manager did kind of a congress to connect African music industry with Western music industry. Cool. Maybe, I don't know. And so I was with him there, and on both occasions I was supposed to perform with him, and it didn't work out. because
it's a
in the
shame.
Autokonzert there was a technical issue, so he had to rearrange his whole set. And in Kenya, it was a bit difficult, a bit different. And I also for the main part, I went to Kenya to play my own sets, and I did that. But we were also supposed to perform together, but it didn't work out. And so there were like these 3 occasions where we didn't perform, and then I think that's what I explained on the gig, that on the last occasion he said to me, "Yeah, Roland, and if you ever want to not perform again, to call."
For Kenya, which must have been a really exciting experience, was that an option because of the worldwide reach of the home music video?
No, the Kenya thing actually really happened via Per, his manager back then, because he had a really strong connection to Kenya. And it was exciting for me to be in that country. I've never been to Africa, and and it was it is fascinating in a way, because I think when you have such a simple image of places that you haven't been to, like to really make simple, Africa is like a desert, and then there's some jungle, and that's it. And you go to Kenya, and they have I don't know, this huge train track that runs through national park, with very modern, and these train stations that look like space stations, and cities, but also these, of course they have huge spaces in between, but also a lot of, it's a lot greener than I expected it as well. And and I don't know, I find experience like that also very humbling in a way, because you construct your images of what you have from places that you haven't been to, from the tiny bits and things that you get from here and there, and but sometimes it is totally misleading.
So the last thing I wanted to ask about is the Berlin show you have upcoming in the planetarium. You mentioned there were 3 30-minute sets. What does that look like? What's the show going to look like for people who are going to go?
It's going to be like a mini festival with 3 acts, with Rosa Anschütz, Mink, and me. And
Mink is a previous guest of the podcast.
Nice. I'm looking forward, and all of us are playing 30-minute sets, which are going to be accompanied by visuals into the how do you say that?
Into the dome of the planetarium.
Into the dome of the planetarium. And
cool.
I'm very, very excited about that.
Nice. So that's pretty much it. You have the Germany tour coming up, which is
in December.
big.
After that, really looking forward.
Which is spread between the 7th and the 14th. It's Frankfurt, Dortmund, Bonn, Hamburg, and Erfurt is all in there, and this show in Berlin with Mink. Is there anything else that you would like to promote? Just the album.
The album, and maybe one thing. The next releases are going to be very special versions of songs of the album that I did together with an acoustic guitar duo. They're called TMBM, and they did rearrangements of my songs, and I sang them. And we've already released one of them, From Sting to Smiling. The next one is From a Crack of Light, and then a few more songs following, David Lynch. And I'm really looking forward to that, because this is also something where I take a little holiday from being a producer, and I'm just a singer.
Nice. Awesome. Well, For those who are still listening, it really, really helps the platform, the podcast. If you can leave a review on your podcast platform of choice, if you can follow Roland as well. Everything
Thanks.
will be in the description. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Roland, very much for coming.
Thank you for the invite.
Done.